My name is Justin, and I'm an addict, and thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I'm sober one day at a time since June 19th, 2015, and for that, I am beyond grateful. Welcome to the RECO12 speaker meeting. We are an organization whose addictions include alcohol, drugs, lust, and sex, food, and gambling, just to name a few. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to learn the similarities of addiction and to gain tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We invite recovering addicts with at least 1 year sobriety and who are actively working their recovery in their respective fellowships to share their experience, strength, and hope on a live Zoom webinar each Friday at noon Central Time for 20 to 25 minutes. Then we, the live audience, get the opportunity to ask questions of the speaker for another 20 to 25 minutes. If you're hearing this meeting in recorded podcast form and would like to participate as a live audience member in the future, please go to RECO12.com, that's RECO12.com, to learn more and submit your email address there to receive weekly invitations. RECO12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our 12th step in this manner. We gratefully accept contributions to help cover the costs of the Zoom platform, podcast platform, web hosting, and administrative costs. To contribute, you can go to RECO12.com/support, or you can click the link to PayPal that I'll post in the chat of the live meeting and also in the show notes of the podcast. When you contribute, please specify the meeting number. This meeting is number 46, and I just want to express gratitude for the several donations that came in this last week. It's a huge help for us. Last week's meeting was with John S. and was a really fantastic meeting about cutting out the junk and just doing the work. If you missed hearing that very powerful meeting or any other meeting we've done, you can listen to them in podcast form by searching for RECO12 Speaker Meeting Podcast on virtually any podcast platform that you use. Or you can go to the RECO12 website and find it under the link podcast. I have a quick favor. If you're listening to this on your podcast platform, please hit pause right now and go and rate and review RECO12. It really helps us get this message out to more addicts who suffer and who want diverse speakers about their own experience, strength, and hope. Now, one more word about our speakers before we introduce today's guest speaker. When we line up a speaker for a meeting, we ask them to seek guidance on what and how to present so that they can reflect the light they have been given. That light will inspire hope, meaning, worth, and growth in each of us, the listening audience. Now I'll go ahead and introduce our guest speaker for today, Faith A., whose topic is spiritual and personal growth during transitional phases. Faith has been sober since June 25th, 2013. Her main fellowship is AA, though she has dipped her toe in ITAA, Internet and Technology Addicts Anonymous. I'm definitely going to be checking that one out. Her recovery is based on a 12-step program that requires daily maintenance, which involves at minimum daily prayer and meditation, pausing and watching for character defects, correcting when necessary, and working with others. Now I'm going to turn the time over to Faith to lead us in the lay aside prayer in the moment of silence.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm Faith. I am an alcoholic and an addict, and we're going to start with the lay aside prayer. God, please lay aside everything I think I know about myself, the big book, my addiction, the steps, and especially you, God, so that I might find an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me to see the truth about myself and you. Amen. Okay. I love that prayer. It's not directly from the big book, but it's from a lot of different parts of the big book. And it pretty much sums up what I needed to do in order to find my recovery. So thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to be here. And I've been able to make it to a few of them. And I really love the speakers that you've had and what you do here. So I guess I'll just start with a little bit about myself. So I've been sober for a little over 7 years, actually over 7 years. And I came into AA with a little bit of time under my belt. I tried really hard to white knuckle it on my own in the beginning, and that did not work out too well for me. I relapsed a few times, and then, there's all kinds of fun war stories and stuff that I don't want to get into. But the bottom line is, I felt broken. I knew that I couldn't do it on my own anymore, And I knew, I remember a breaking point one day where sober, I was dry. I hadn't had a drink or a drug in, gosh, probably about 8 months at that point, maybe. And I remember looking at the day ahead of me and knowing that if I didn't get help from someone, that by the end of the day, I would either be using again, drinking again, or kill myself. And that was all there was to it. There was no in between. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was my first step. I finally understood I was powerless. I finally understood that no matter what, I was going to drink. That's just who I was. So, I texted someone actually that had given me her number, previously and said, yeah, I'll sponsor you. And I was like, sure, yeah, I'll call you. And I never did, of course. Like, I booked it and disappeared. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was so lucky that she was very well versed in the big book. She was, got me into the steps immediately. Like, I texted her. She told me to call her immediately, and I did. And we met for a meeting. And then the next time we met, we were sitting in a diner reading the big book together. And I was so embarrassed and so afraid. And but at that point, aware of my powerlessness, that I would have done anything she told me to do. So I was like, well, if you're doing it, I'm doing it. I don't care. I'll read the big book out loud in the diner. I don't care if people are looking at me funny, which they weren't, because no one even notices or cares. But in my head, everybody's looking at me, right? So she got me into the work right away. I finally had language for all the things I'd been feeling for so long. Like I grew up always feeling other than, always feeling like an outsider, never being able to connect with other people. Unable, and then when I got older and everybody was drinking, I had friends that drank just like I did, partied just like I did. And then at some point around 30, they all grew up and they started getting married and having babies and getting real careers. And I was still like partying, like they're like, oh, there's going to be a party at so-and-so's house. And I'm like, great, I'll bring my glow sticks. That's not, I'm joking. But, and I show up with like 3 bottles of whiskey and they have babies. And I'm like, what is happening? And like, I just kept waiting for this like switch to flip, and it wouldn't happen. Like, it just wasn't happening for me. And I couldn't understand why. And I just thought I was broken, built wrong, going to be looking at life from the, outside looking in for forever. And I was kind of resigned to that. And then I came into the program, and I finally had language for, the phenomenon of craving, and like understanding how that like perpetuates itself, and for the obsession, and like that like feeling of like, how am I going to get it? When am I going to get it? Or how am I not going to do it? And understanding that normal people, normies, don't do that. Right. Like my mom is not an alcoholic. She doesn't sit there and come up with ways on how not to drink. She just doesn't, and I finally like it I finally like found my home, it was like, oh my God, these are my people. And so it was incredible. It was like, I finally felt alive for the first time in my life. I remember like not wanting to go to sleep. I felt like Rip Van Winkle. I was like, if I go to sleep, I might not wake up again. And I don't want to be a zombie. I don't want to go back to that, like living in that gray life. Like, I just want to be here and alive. And it was great for like the first 3 years of my sobriety was like through the roof. All these good things kept happening, like the cash and the prizes and that kind of, all those things they talk about were happening. And I was forming this incredible relationship with a God of my understanding that like I finally really wanted and like felt connected to. And I finally had this connection. And I met my, who is now my husband, who at the time was my boyfriend, best friend, and then boyfriend, and then fiance in recovery. And he proposed to me about 3 years in. And 4 months later, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And it was like record scratch, like, oh my God, what's happening? And like, and the thing about it is it wasn't as scary as you'd think it'd be, right? Because I had the 12 steps at that point. I had God at that point. And I remember, I tell this story a lot, but on page 43 in the big book, I think it's Fred talks about how he wouldn't give up his best day out there for his worst day sober. And I remember reading that and being like, I don't know about that. I had some really good days out there, because before it got ugly, it was fun. That's why I did it. It was really useful in the beginning. It took my mind off a lot of stuff. So I remember the day I got diagnosed, which is arguably one of my worst days sober, I called one friend first, and she was in the program and she had a strong program. And she said, you can cry about it for about 30 seconds. And now what are you going to do about it? Right. Like she wouldn't let me get into self-pity, which I so appreciated. And then the next thing I did was call my sponsor, but I didn't call my sponsor to cry or to why me or to even do an inventory on it. I called my sponsor to game plan on how to tell my family. Like, how can I present this to my mother in a way that won't break her heart? How am I going to tell my fiance, who we're just starting our lives together now, this, and we figured it out, and we brought God in, and the whole experience, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me. Cancer changed my lives in ways, in my life and my husband's, our life together, in ways that I never could have done on my own. Like, God did for me what I could not do for myself. It brought us closer. It got our families closer. My father is a retired police officer. My mother was a paramedic. My husband has a colored past. It's the best way I can put it. And when I first had to introduce them to him, I had to invite them up to New York City to meet him instead of bringing him home, because he was on probation and couldn't leave the 5 boroughs. And I did not want to tell my dad that, right? Like, right? Like, how am I going to tell my dad that? So when they first met him, they were a little wary, right? That's another incredible story, the power of the program. Like, I wanted to lie. And my husband, fiance, boyfriend at the time, whatever, said, I don't want to start my relationship with your parents on a lie. Like, they might not like me, and they might be a little wary in the beginning, and I don't care. They'll see how much I love you. They'll see that we belong together. Eventually they will learn to love me. And that's how I want, like, our relationship to be, not sneaking around. And I was like, well, I can't argue with that. And, that's how we did that. And, with the whole cancer situation, what would have taken like 7 awkward Thanksgivings took 6 months for my parents to realize how good of a man he was, and how he stuck by me and how he took care of me. And they love him now, like, love him. And I got to do the same with his family, like, we really got to connect, and it was an incredible experience. And it taught me, a lot about vanity. Oh dear. Like, so much about how I see myself and how I want other people to see me, and how much my self-worth is based in how I think people see me. And oh my God, so much of that. And it taught me how not important I am at my job, which I thought would crumble to the ground without me, right? Like, I can't, they need me. I need to be there. They don't at all, which means now that I'm there full time again, I can pack up my computer at 6 o'clock or 6:30 and stop working. I don't need to be there till 10 o'clock at night. I don't need to work weekends. I don't need to pull all-nighters, and all that changed because of this. So I guess that's part of the point, is how much growth happened during that time. And we talked a little before we started about other things that have happened. And, like, this isn't a woe is me or poor me story about all these terrible things that happened, but, like, it's been rough. There's been some stuff, after cancer, I decided I was going to, like, take my health back by the reins, and I signed up for the marathon to start running again, because I used to be a runner a while ago. And about, oh gosh, not even like a month into my training, I broke my ankle. Went to the doctor, and it turned out that I have osteopenia, which is the precursor to osteoporosis, because of all the cancer treatment I took. So my bones are brittle, and they were like, you shouldn't run. And I was heartbroken, and then had to heal from that, and, like, had to sit around and wait until that got better before I could do something again. And then something else, it turned out I had this other condition called myelomalacia, which is when my spinal cord literally was like mortar and pestle being, like, turned to mush by my spine, because my spine was herniated in my neck, and I had to have surgery and get a fusion, and I have metal plates in my neck now. And then the pandemic hit, which we've all had to deal with, right? Like, all of us have had so much change in this last year. So much change has happened. And the one thing that keeps coming home to me is, like, this is my life. Like, this is life, because all these things happen. And I keep being like, when I get to the other side of it, when this is over, I will. Once this is done, this is going to happen. And I keep holding my breath, waiting for, like, this to be over so that my life can start. And the truth is that this has been my life the whole time. And if I wait for those transition phases to end, I'm just wasting time. I'm just wasting time. And in fact, like these moments that life gives us to like take a step back and like really breathe and really look at things, like that's where the growth is. Like being able to take these things that happen to us that we think of as other, or we think of as not part of our lives, or we think that they shouldn't belong here, right? Like this shouldn't belong here. My real life is this. This is just a bump in the road, or this is just an accident, or this, when we deny those things, like we lose so much learning that we could gain, if we just accepted them as real life, you know. And that was a big part of my growth during all of this, was like, because additionally, I'm a very lucky dual diagnosis person. I also deal with some mental illness, and I have a completely different way to treat that I have to do too. And sometimes that crops up and I want to be like, this isn't me. I just want to get back to me. And the truth is that all of that is me. Like I'm me, whether I'm depressed or in a paranoid episode or in a manic episode, like all those things are still me. I don't get to pick and choose what parts of my life are real. And when I can take those things and bring God into it and learn the lesson from it and like alchemize them into gold, like alchemize them into something that's useful and helpful. I can help other people. I can learn from them. I can bring them into the forefront and treat them as real parts of me instead of waiting for it to be over, And so I have found with all of those things, and with I'm sure way much more to come, is like that's the meat of it. Like that's the life. And I get to this point now where I'm like, God, like when my life is over, I want to be all used up. Like I want to be covered. I love my scars. I'm like, they're like, like I want to be all used up, and I want it all to be. I want it to be like, like you don't go to an amusement park to stay on the merry-go-round. Like I want to, I want to ride all the rides, and if I can look at life that way and look at all these things as like part of life, part of the ride, part of the fun, part of the amusement, then I feel like I'm really alive, And I recently had this meditation where it was so great. It was like, there's different parts of me that sometimes want to fall into self-pity and be like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And it's like, yeah, and life is still beautiful. Like, yeah, have you ever pet a puppy? Like, have you ever eaten ice cream? Oh my, like, yeah, life is still awesome. Like it's great. And like, that's the growth that comes from accepting these things as part of me. And I think that a big part of it plays into the 12 steps, because I think it's a lot of it is in 6 and 7, right? Like I need to be willing to see these things about myself. I need to be willing to accept where I am. I need to be willing to accept that I could be someone different, because like 7 can't happen until I'm actually willing. And I think that when we get these moments where we're forced to re-examine, like these are all opportunities to re-examine every time a new crisis comes up, or a fight, with someone that you care about, or the pandemic, right? There are opportunities to re-examine. And when I can take those opportunities and like look at them for what they are, there's a real I keep using the word opportunity. There's a real chance to change things, to be willing to change things, be like, what works, what doesn't work, like while we're here, while we're stepping back, let's see like what we want to keep and what we want to get rid of. And then I can bring that to God. And I think that all starts with like being willing to see myself differently. Like, can I see myself as someone who, silly, but who, I don't know, rides a bike instead of runs? And I don't want to see myself that way, because I like to see myself as the active person that I used to be, who would like scramble up rocks on a hike and jump over the tree stump that's in the way instead of walk around it. And I can't do that anymore because my bones can't handle it. And I don't want that to be true. Like I don't want that. I want to go back, and I can't do that. And like, that's just not going to happen. And so I need to be willing to see myself differently. And once I'm willing and I can bring it to God, and I think that's the catalyst for all change. It has to be, you have to be willing. I remember bringing that in when I first went through the steps, when I was in 6 and 7 the first time. um, I remember looking at all of those things that we came up with in my 5th step, like all the character defects and I look at like dishonesty, and I look at fear, and I look at all these things, and I'm like, of course I want them gone. Like, of course I don't want to be a liar. I don't want to be afraid of everything. Of course I do. But when it really comes down to it, and I really consider what my life looks like without it, I don't know that I do. Like, I don't know that I am willing. If I'm completely honest, what do I tell my boss when I'm running late? Like, I don't get to say the subway was behind. It's like I woke up late. Like, I don't get to do that. And if I really have no fear, then who's got my back? Right? Like, my self-reliance means that I need my fear to keep me safe. And if I don't have that, then do I really trust that God does? So there's a lot of things that like I wasn't willing to give up, and it's easy to just bowl over those things and keep staying on autopilot, right? Like, I'm on autopilot. I'm going to work every day. I'm doing this thing every day, whatever it is, like whatever your routine is. It's really easy to just stay in that and be like, this is what I'm doing. This is what works. It's been okay all this time. I'm just going to stay here. But then we get these like record scratching, forks dropping situations where it's like, well, let's look at this. Like, let me look at really look at this. Like, what's working and what isn't. And like I said, that's where the growth is. Being able to actually see these things, be willing to look at them, be willing to change things. Like, can I see myself as the kind of person who, oh, I don't know, in the beginning, when I first, doesn't scream at people when I'm angry. You know what I mean? Like, what if I'm the kind of person that goes like, oh, I disagree. Let me take a minute. Like, I didn't see myself like that before. The same way I used to be a smoker. Like, I'm a smoker. That's my identity. My identity is in like the things that I do, the way that I react. Like, at my old job, they used to call me Kung Fu Faith, because when I was angry, I would kick things and throw things. Like, and that was my identity. That's how I saw myself. And until I reached a point where I had to like take a step back and look at that, I wasn't willing to change it, because honestly, like, you don't know what you don't know. I didn't even realize it could change, you know? And so I think that when things like this happen, and in particular right now, we're all dealing with this pandemic, and the being forced to stay home, being forced to change how we act with other people, being maybe losing our jobs, and being forced to look at like, what else can I do to make money, or what makes me happy, or was I even happy at my job? Is there something else I could be doing? I think that if it's difficult, because I know that it caused so much hardship. Like, I lost my grandmother. She was in a nursing home, and we couldn't go see her, and it was so sad. It was so sad. Like, so I don't want to discount how hard it's been for everyone. But also, with everything, like, we can't dwell on that. Like, you have to look for the part that you can grow from. You have to look for the learning points. And for me, within this pandemic, it was honestly, like, I got over the cancer. I dealt with a lot of the health issues, and then this new one came up, but in all of that, I kept being like, I have to get back to work the way I was before. I have to get back to work the way I was before. Like, that was my goal. My goal the whole time was to be able to work at 110% the way I used to. And when this whole thing happened, it was like, do I? Like, do I? Like, is it that important? And what I ended up doing is, in my job, I had several responsibilities, but my job is great in that if you want to make more money, you can bring in your own clients. And if you bring in your own clients, then you can get a higher commission on like working with them. So as long as you're doing your other job, you can bring in this extra work if you want to. So really, the sky's the limit, how much money you want to make. So I was like, like going like really in there, like trying to get all this work in and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden it was like, do I even want, like, is it worth it? Is the extra money worth it? And the truth is that it isn't. I was working myself to death. I was giving I really believe that stress attacks the weakest link. And I really believe that the cancer was a result of how much stress I had in my life. I was living a life like up here all the time, like, like all the time, like, like my shoulders were always up here. And and this, like amazing opportunity to take a step back and be like, to not have to live like that for a little bit, like work slowed down. There was no work. We were sitting around twiddling our thumbs, waiting for stuff to roll in. And all of a sudden I had days where, I was like, maybe I don't have to sit at my desk. And I would like bring my phone with me and go sit at the kitchen table instead. And it was like, oh, like, this is what life could be like. Oh my God. And now that it's like kind of coming to a close and things are getting back to normal, I called my boss and said, I'm not coming back to the office. And she said, do you still want to work for me? And I was like, if you want me to. And she was like, okay, we'll figure it out. But I had to be willing to let it go, right? Like I had to be willing to be like, I might have to find a new job, but this is the life I want. Like I might have to get a new job, but like this is how I need to be from now on. And I never would have even had that clarity if I didn't have the wrecking ball that came through our lives. And I think that those are really important. I really believe that was God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. Like I really believe that I can't imagine the way I used to be a world where I'd be like, I need to work less. That just wouldn't have happened. That's not who I was. And now I get to be, I have boundaries now. After 7 o'clock, I put my phone on do not disturb, my work phone on do not disturb, and I turn the volume off. And that's freedom for me. And that might sound obvious to other people, but it was not for me. Like that was something I used to sleep with my phone next to me in case someone needed me. Like that's not healthy. That's a lot of things, but it's not healthy. And so, I think I'll probably wrap it up there. We're at 127. I hope that was helpful to some people. Thank you so much for letting me speak, and I'm anxious to hear from you guys. Thanks.
Oh, Faith, that was really good and very timely for me, and I think for a lot of other people. Such good stuff. Thank you so much for sharing about these transitional phases and the spiritual and personal growth that comes during those things. Before we get into the Q&A, a reminder to our live audience, if you have questions, please type them in the Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom window. It looks like two speech bubbles overlapping each other. We've got a few that have already come in from our live audience, and I have a few that I've written. But before we get there, Faith, if you could take just a minute and share with us how the fellowship that you attend helps you. This isn't advertising or marketing. It's just an attraction thing, how this helps you.
Sure. Great. So I'm in AA primarily. And like we talked about in the beginning, I briefly dipped my toe, and I'm still kind of edging around ITAA, which is Internet and Technology Addicts Anonymous, which I think really took off when the pandemic hit, because all of a sudden we had nothing but screens in front of us. But honestly, it's the same program, right? Like the main difference is, I think it's the same with all non-substance, things that you can't completely remain abstinent from. It's got, I think, lines instead of, there's circles and red like colors and lines, similar, but the program's the same. It's the 12 steps, and it helped me mainly because it connected me to a God of my understanding that I connect to every single day. I did the 12 steps to the best of my ability. I did the full inventory. I cleaned everything out. And the way I see it is, I believe my God is banging down my door, always wants to come in, has always been like, let me in, just let me in the door. And that I've had all this stuff in the way of my own self-will, my anger, my fear, my procrastination, all these things, resentment, like blocking the door. I couldn't even get to the door, let alone open it. So when I did the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like I'm dancing 5, 6, 7, 8, I was able to clear the clutter out, right? So now I can get to the door, and now the door is able to be opened, but I still need to open it every day. So I do the program. I wake up in the morning, I do 10, I pray, meditate immediately. I just recently started doing two-way prayer, which is an incredible process. I would encourage anyone to look into that, twowayprayer.org. I work with others. I sponsor other women. I do service when I'm asked to, and staying on top of inventories, step 10, like when things come up, I deal with them. And that program just keeps me clear is the best way I can put it, calm, able to deal with the stuff that is thrown at me, like able to deal with life in a way that is helpful to other people and to me, and that it doesn't take a lot of energy. It's just like an easier way to live is the best way that I can put it.
Love it. Thank you very much, Faith. All right, we've got a few questions that have come in from our live audience. I'm going to read this first one here. It comes in from an anonymous attendee, an AA. 2 questions, anonymous attendee says. 1, can you talk about some of the spiritual practices you used when to deal with the difficulties when these obstacles came up? And then the second one, can you talk about some of the times when you had mental illness episodes and used the program to stay spiritually fit and sober despite having an active mental illness episode?
Absolutely. Thank you. Great questions. So, number one, it's like, I know you probably hear it all the time, but staying in 10, 11, and 12 are so important. Like having to keep my own spiritual fitness in order to handle the other things that were being thrown at me was paramount. So it meant doing my 11-step review at night, like going through the questions on 84 through 86. It meant staying in touch with the fellowship. I always want to consider myself a lone wolf. I always want to consider myself someone that doesn't need other people, and that's just not true. And that's another thing that the cancer specifically taught me. Like I absolutely need other people. And the bottom line is fellowship is part of the triangle. It's part, there's fellowship and unity and recovery. There's the 12 steps and there's fellowship, and so it's a third leg, and it's just as important as the other two. And so I really learned to depend on other people, which was another big lesson I had to learn. Like I do need other people in my life. I can't just do this by myself. And I continued working with my sponsees, which was also really, really important. I remember having to call each of them and being like, look, I'm sick and I might not be as available to you as I would like to be. And if that's a problem for you, here's my sponsor's information. And we spoke about it ahead of time. Like she said, you can just work with her 100%, or she can be your backup. If I'm not available and you need someone, you can call her. But, and I don't want to beg, please stay with me. Like I need you. I remember having days where I was like laying in bed, unable to move, unable to eat, like so hungry, but couldn't eat and like wasting away to nothing. And my sponsees calling me and being like, you don't want to hear about my boss. And I'm like, I do. I really, please tell me about your day. Like, I'm so sick of myself and like hearing my own, I want to hear about, please let me help you. I would love that, and that was a huge part of keeping me like, okay, like be still feeling useful, that's so important. It's feeling useful is a really big part of humanity. I always use as an example in when 9/11 hit, right down by the towers, they had search dogs, and the search dogs were sent there to look for people, and the search dogs started getting depressed because they couldn't find people and they kept failing, and they didn't want to work anymore. So the other workers were hiding in the rubble and letting the work dogs find them so that the dog could feel like I found someone and continue to go on. Like that's how important it is to be able to feel useful. So I really, really needed sponsees. I needed to be able to help other people. It was so important in order to keep my spirits up. So that's that. I guess I can end that question with I hope that was helpful. And for mental illness, it's really funny. I'm so grateful I have such a strong program that those things that I do are routine, right? 10, 11, and 12 are routine for me. I don't think about them. I just do them. It's part of my life now. And I love metaphors, and I'm sorry if it gets annoying, but if you ever have acted in a show or anything, what I was taught was you need to know your script so well inside and out so that you're not thinking about it. So if anything else gets thrown your way, you're still on script. You just take it, right? Like you just roll with it, and you won't forget your lines because you know them so well. And that's how the program has to be for me. I know it so well that it never stopped, even during my mental illness episodes. And I remember, because sometimes they take me out, right? Like I remember I disappeared for like a month. I didn't call anyone back. I just kind of fell off the face. I didn't go to meetings. I wasn't talking to people. I wasn't returning phone calls or text message. I just disappeared for like a month, right? But I was doing 10, 11, and 12. I was keeping on top of my inventories. I was waking up every morning and praying and meditating, no matter what. I was doing my 11-step review. Sometimes I would pass out before I even did, but I really tried. And I did return sponsees phone calls. I did stay. That was the one commitment I had that I did not give up on. And at the end of the month, I remember finally calling people back and being like, I'm sorry, having to make amends for ghosting. Right. And like staying on top of that also. And one of my close friends said, and she's been in and out and like relapsing and not relapsing. And I remember she said, whoa, you didn't relapse? And I was like, no. And she was like, you went through all of that and you didn't relapse? And I was like, yeah, I guess not. And she's like, that's incredible. And I was like, yeah, that's a miracle. Because honestly, like that's what used to be my medication. Before I understood what I had to deal with, or before I understood what I was up against, I was drinking and using drugs to medicate that. And the fact that my program was already so instilled in me, like I know it and I do it no matter what, that I was able to continue. And I do think that's a miracle. Like the mental illness might take me down, but it is separate from my alcoholism and my addiction. Like they require two separate treatments, and I treat them differently. And I guess the day I fail on both of those treatments will be the day I go down. But I don't know. I'm just kidding. But yeah, that's what it was. It was really sticking to the program, even though, and that's only comes from practice. Like I just had to keep doing it, no matter what. Keep doing it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And there's some really good stuff in there. I appreciate that, Faith. This next question comes from a live audience member, Monroe. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lead into it with a little bit of a question that I wrote. And then I think his question may need a little bit additional light shown on it from your perspective, maybe. But you talked a little bit about embracing all of you, the good and bad, and incorporating that into who you are as a whole person, and just embracing even the negative aspects of self and making that. So Monroe's question says, I think I struggle with the idea of saying it's all me, the good and bad, because my wife often tells me she likes the way I am when not showing addictive tendencies. She likes, quote, the real me. What should I do when approached by my wife when she has this mentality? And so think about that and let us know what your thoughts are on that, Faith.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say a couple of things. So maybe you've heard this before. I've heard it a lot. But the whole story of when they were making the statue of David, and it's like, how did you make David? And it's like, I chipped away all the things that weren't David. So I would say there are a lot of behaviors that I exhibit that I wouldn't consider the real me. And those would be the things before I was recovered, before I even knew who I was, and the things that I did out of habit and out of, not even knowing that there were other ways I could be. I think the real us is our highest self. I think the real me is my highest self. It's the me that would always choose good, always choose love. I think that I do sometimes fail at that. And the failure part is the human part of me that I need to accept. I'm not perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to do things that hurt other people. I don't want to. And I think that I think that's the part of me that I need to embrace. But also to not hate the parts of me that aren't working, right? Like I can't beat myself up over failures. I can't beat myself up when I make a mistake and I snap at someone. I can't hate myself for that. I need to accept that there's a part of me that isn't recovered right now. There's a part of me that's having a problem right now. There's a part of me that I need to embrace and show love and talk to, right? That's been a big thing. One of the things that I've been doing in my other treatment is identifying the parts of me that are like causing problems, right? And like giving them names. So there's Jane, and she's like the angry feminist that hates all men. Sorry, she's there. I don't like her, but bringing her in, and when things come up, I instead of being like, shut up, go away, like, oh, you're making me, I don't want to deal with you, being like, hey, Jane, good to see you. What's going on? Like, what are you trying to tell me? I know that you're doing this out of love. I know that you're trying to protect me. I know that you're trying to help me in some way, but I don't need you to do it this way anymore. So what do you need me to know? And then I'll take it from here. Right. So that's what I mean by embracing those parts of me that are, I don't like. There are parts of myself that I do not like, but they're still me. And if I push them down and pretend that they don't exist, they're going to come out in other ways. They're going to come out in ways that I don't like. So it's been really important for me to be able to accept them as a part of me, as something that I created, right? Like, we create character defects, we create those addictive behaviors out of a need at some point in our lives. Like we do it because at some point it was helpful. At some point it was useful. I learned to lie because the first time I told the truth, I got in trouble. So guess what? I'm lying next time because I don't want to get in trouble. And that's a really, really simplified example, but it's the truth. And so those addictive behaviors that we have, those character defects that we have, those parts of self that are so huge that it seemed like they're taking over and like running our lives, we put them there in place because we needed them. And now in recovery, I can go back to them and be like, thank you for your service. Thank you for the help that you gave me. It was really useful during that time, but I have other tools now. I have a God now. I have people that I can talk to now, and like, we don't need to behave this way anymore. So please stop.
I love it. And I've got an inner part of me that has done so much damage in my life, but also serves a purpose. It's my inner perfectionist. I tried to be my own God, basically, my own judge, jury, and executionist because of that inner perfectionist. But now that I can embrace the good and the bad, the strong and the weak parts of me and acknowledge it, that perfectionist, yeah, there's a purpose for the perfectionist. But like you said, there are other tools now, and I can embrace weakness and help others with that weakness. It's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Faith. The next question, it also comes right along with what you shared here in this last, talking about what you just talked about, honesty. Practicing rigorous honesty and being honest in all cases, even when it hurts. One of the questions that came in from one of the audience members says, I struggle with painting the truth with a broad brush, like your example with being late. Do you have any advice on how to change those things and tell the full truth with confidence, even when it's going to hurt?
Mm-hmm. That is such a good question, and something that I still struggle with. And some days I'm good at it, and some days I'm not, and some days I have to apologize for it. So, yay, we're human, but I think one of the things is I really had to bring it to God, right? And another thing that really helps me is I actually heard this from someone else, not in AA. I was a speaker I was listening to on something else, but he said, when something comes from the truth, it's right and good and correct. So what that means to me is I had to deal with this at work recently, because at work is where I come up with that the most, because I want to people please. I want my boss to like me. I want all my jobs to go well. I want my vendors to love who I am so that they'll do work for me. And I don't, I have so much ambition at work. Work is something I'm constantly struggling with, and like keeping my program, because in the beginning I thought I can't do my job if I'm honest. Like I can't do my job if I'm nice. My first amends was to a vendor, because I like called him up and screamed at him, and my sponsor was like, you need to apologize. And I was like, no, I can't give him an inch. Like, this is a man's industry. I work in printing. I'm like, this is a man's industry and I need to be tough. And if I'm nice, then they'll walk all over me. And she was like, yeah, or you can try and do the program and see how it works. And I remember doing it, and it worked out amazingly. He was like, no one's ever apologized to me in 20 years. And now he's like my best friend. So like, what do I know, but anyway, honesty at work specifically, but honesty in general. It was a whole lot of bringing God in, and a whole lot of accepting that surgery hurts, but in the long run, it's good because it corrects the things that are hurting you, and that's how I have to look at honesty. So, just recently this thing came up at work where I tried to cover for someone, and then it came back and bit me in the butt and almost got that person in a lot of trouble. So I had to go back and be like, I lied, I covered for them. And I did not want to do that because I did not want my boss's reaction, right? Like, but what it came down to was, and I really had to work, I did a fear inventory. I did a big, huge fear inventory on it. And what it came down to is like, I don't know what's going to happen, but here's what could happen, right? My worst case scenario, here's what could happen. She freaks out. She's so mad at me. How could you lie to me? I can't work like this. You're fired, right? Worst case scenario. I've been working with this woman for 10 years. She's one of my best friends. That wouldn't happen, but that's worst case scenario. I'm fired. Then what? God's got me. I'll find a new job. It'll suck, right? Like it'll be stressful, but like I'm not going to end up like homeless and desolate in the street. And even if I do, I have lots of friends who are homeless and desolate in the street, and they're doing great now. So like I've learned from example of the people around me that like even my worst case scenarios that I think can happen as a result are going to be okay. And then, like next case scenario would be, she's really mad at me and she's like, we can't work like this. Like we need to change, right? This isn't going to work. So maybe that means we have to sit down and discuss our workflow and how things are working. And maybe that'll be a painful process, but in the end, we'll probably come up with a better way to do things and it'll be easier for me and better for her. So anything that happens as a result of the truth, even if it feels like it sucks, is probably better, right? Is better, not even probably. I really believe that. I believe that when things fall like down the waterfall as a result of being honest, then any fallout that happens from it, ultimately, it's just setting the world right, right? Like when you set a broken bone, it hurts, but you need to set it right. So that's what I have to bring in when I don't want to be honest, is really, really bring that in. And that only comes with God, like taking that pause and being like, God, help me with this. Right. Even if it sucks, it's going to be okay.
Beautiful. Love it. All right. Two more questions. We have one from the audience and one from me, and then we'll wrap things up. Can you please give me examples of healthy rewards for yourself? Like if you're moving along well, a healthy reward for yourself.
Healthy rewards. That's a good one. It's a good question. I'm like, do I reward myself? Honestly, I have to say that one of the things that I've been trying to integrate into my life that also came out of being in this pandemic and having the time to really sit back and look at things is trying to incorporate those things that I would consider rewards into my actual life. For instance, I love drawing and painting. I love to create, and previously that would be my reward, right? After you do all the things, after work is done, after the chores are done, after you've made all your phone calls, then you get to sit down and do these things. And often I never did them because who has time? My to-do list is always adding more. There's always more to it. And so I wasn't really rewarding myself at all, and if I did, it would be something on the fly, like an ice cream cone, which actually is really not a reward for me. That's really bad for me, but I'm like, it tastes good. So the new things I'm trying to do is actually incorporate those into my daily life so that the things I love are actually a part of my life and seeing them as not superfluous, but as necessary, like rewarding yourself for good behavior, might not even be fair, maybe you should just be good to yourself all the time. And that's easier said than done because I am such a martyr. I am the kind of person that would, like I said, when the dishes are done, when everything is swept, once the bed is made, when the clothes are folded and the clothes are away, and then all my work is done. And you know what, even the work I could do tomorrow, I'm going to do today just so I can get a jump start. All of that, then I can do the things that make me happy. And like that doesn't make me happy and it's not helpful. It actually wears me to the ground. So incorporating, I keep my sketch pad out. So if I have like after work between 6:30 and 7:00, when I have like a sponsee at 7 and work ends at 6:30, maybe instead of jumping up and doing the dishes and trying to clean the house, I'll sit down and sketch for a half hour and just put that back into my day. And I think it's a better process than just like giving myself, a gold trophy because I did the right thing, if that's helpful.
I love the perspective shift that happened when you were explaining that. I totally had this shift in my own mind, and I need to schedule in something that makes me happy today. I think I'm going to mow the lawn in the middle of the day because that makes me happy.
I was like, enough. That's not okay.
Yeah. Strangely enough, that makes me happy. All right. One more question here, and then we'll close things out. And Faith, I want to go back to what you shared at the beginning, not at the beginning, but during your share. You talked about how you want to live your life and just be spent at the end of your life, like riding all the rides in the in the park and everything. What is the difference between that idea now and the idea of squeezing everything out of life in addiction? I mean, because really for me, the motivation is the same. I want to do all of these things. Whereas in recovery, I want to do all of these things, but it's a different motivation. Can you explain a little bit the difference in those motivations and the results from them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say I did feel that way when I was drinking and using. I wanted to run myself to the ground, right? Like I remember this is one of the catalysts for me trying to get help was we were sitting around at work all talking about like what we would do if we had $1 million. And it was like, oh, I would travel the world. I mean, $1 billion at this point, right? We would travel the world. And one person was like, I would go to school and get all the degrees. And one person was like, I would buy a house in Mexico. And my best idea was I would buy a house. I would pay for everything up front for 1 year, all the electricity, all the things. So I would have no responsibilities for a year because it would all be paid up ahead of time. And then I would get a ton of Percocets and a ton of whiskey and a ton of weed. And I would just pop pills and drink and smoke until the year was up or I killed myself, whichever happened first. That was my best idea. Like, that's how I wanted to live, like run this thing to the ground, The difference is now, one, I remember what I do. And the consequences aren't so bad. And I can do it with other people and like with a God in my life. Like I actually get more out of it. That was more of like a self-destructive want. Like I want to run this thing to the ground so I don't have to deal with it anymore. Like a lot of my drinking and using, and even when I was sober before I did the steps, it was like wishing that a truck would blow a stop sign so it could just let me off the hook. Like that's what I meant when I said run this thing to the ground. Now it's like, oh, I want to live for as long as I can, but I want to enjoy it. Like I want to be able to say I did all the things. Like I want to, I don't know. Like I like the scars. I like the stories. I like the excitement, like I imagine like if you were going to, again, with the amusement park thing, like if life were an amusement park and you were standing in line and they were like, okay, here's the thing. You can, and I'm not knocking it, this is what you want. This is just not what I want. You can have a very nice family, go to school, graduate from college, meet the person of your dreams, marry them or not marry them, but get the house with the white picket fence and 2.5 children and a dog, and everybody's happy and you live out your life to the end, right? It sounds so beautiful. It also sounds really boring to me. And like, that's just not my personality. And if they were like, okay, or you can have a little bit of dysfunction in your family, addiction, alcoholism, mental illness, cancer, spinal surgery, pandemic. There's lots of other things that I don't want to get into, but all these things. But you're also going to have fun and you're going to be connected to us the whole time. You can check in with us whenever you need to. We'll give you like a boost of energy when you need it. And like we're here for you. And like, and then at the end, like, that's what I want. Like, that's fun for me. You know what I mean? So that's what I mean. I don't know if that sounds different, but it does to me. One feels joyful and like I want to experience, and one feels like I want to kill myself, just in like a burning, blazing glory kind of way,
Oh, that's good. I love it. All right. Well, I think we'll close things out here at this point. Thank you so much, Faith. That was a great RECO12 weekly speaker meeting for all addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. If we didn't get to your questions, or if you have other questions, please go to RECO12.com/forum and join in our community and ask those questions and answer others' questions that may come up there. I invite the audience to come back next week. If you've not yet gone to RECO12.com and submitted your email address, please get on the invitation list so that you can join us live each Friday at noon Central Time. Next week, we'll be hearing from Layla J., whose topic will be based on a line from page 62 of the Big Book called, First of All, We Had to Quit Playing God. And I think it's going to be a really good one. Now, let's launch off into the rest of our day with the 7th step prayer that Faith has offered to be voice in.
Great. Thanks so much. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Faith. Keep coming back, everybody. It works when I work it, so work it. You are worth it.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight, still searching